Hey friends, welcome back to Homestead on a Prayer. Today we're up here on my deck and we're going to take a look at the container garden. You know, a few days ago we walked through my main garden area, the in-ground garden, and we just, looked at how all the plants were growing, and I just told you a little bit about the progress and my plans for the garden. So today we're going to do the same thing up here on the deck, and today the focus is going to be on all the plants that I'm growing in containers. Now before we get into the details, here's a quick little overview of the crazy jungle that I have growing up here on my deck this year. Historically, I think in pretty much every past garden that I've had, the plants in the ground have performed significantly better than the plants on the deck. But this year, for some reason, the plants on my deck have turned into this crazy jungle, especially the tomatoes. And I'm not sure, honestly, exactly what the difference is, but this year the plants on my deck are really thriving. Now, the one exception, when I say traditionally or historically the plants on my deck haven't performed as well, the one exception is peppers. You may have noticed in the garden tour that we took together a few days ago through the main garden, I didn't have any peppers growing out in that main garden. That's because I grow them exclusively in pots on my deck because, as I said, those are the exception. Those are the things that have always done better on the deck for me. So you'll see, and as you can kind of see, with this little preview of the deck garden here. This is mostly tomatoes and peppers because peppers, as I said, grow better in pots for me. Tomatoes, I just grow so many tomatoes that I don't have enough space for them out in the garden. And then some herbs here and there. So while there may be a few other exceptions, for the most part, that's what you'll see up here. So we'll start with one of the few exceptions that I mentioned. This is actually my son's plant. This is a clementine tree that he started from a seed that he found in a clementine fruit many years ago, and while it hasn't ever given us any fruit, it's really healthy and nice looking. And then we'll move on to the first green stalk that I have here. This one is a pepper and basil tower. So we did plant this together earlier in the season, and basically my main goal for this green stalk was to grow peppers. So every other pocket I planted a pepper plant, and then the in-between pockets, I planted some seeds for basil, which you can see have nicely germinated now. So while this is an update video, this isn't really a results video, but you can see that so far, the peppers seem to be doing great. I do have some other peppers growing in individual pots on my deck, so we can kind of compare how those two types of peppers are doing together, or not two types of peppers, but how the peppers in the green stalk compare to the peppers growing in individual pots. Of course, most of the pepper plants that are larger fruiting varieties and larger plant varieties, I grew in the individual pots. I tried to keep the green stalk mostly limited to smaller fruited and smaller peppers where the plants stay smaller. But you can still see that the plants on the green stalk are doing really well. So while this is really more of an in-progress video than a results video, you can see that the peppers are looking really good, really big. I am starting to get a few actual peppers on some of these plants here. The basil, of course, is a little bit smaller because while I put pepper transplants in, I started the basil directly from seed in here, but they are starting to catch up and look really nice. So over here I've got some shishito peppers, actual peppers, which some of these are actually going to be ready to harvest really soon. So overall, I'm happy with my, current results. Down here, I've got some different basils. Now these were started at different times. So you can see here, I've got a mammoth lettuce leaf basil. And over here, this is the same variety. But this one I transplanted into this pot, and this one was started from seed directly in the pot. And then here we've got some sweet Genovese basil, kind of the classic Italian basil. And then over here, you can see that I did try to use some companion planting, even on my deck. So this is a large pepper plant in this pot here, but I did put some sweet alyssum and some calendula in the pot with it, partly to attract pollinators, partly just to kind of mulch the soil a little bit, and partly just for beauty. So this is a large pepper plant. This is a larger type than the types I have in the green stalk. This is a chocolate corno de toro, which has some flowers. I don't think it has any actual pepper fruits yet. So this chocolate corno de toro is a new variety to me. I'm really excited to try it this year. That one, along with the orange corno de toro, are two that I'm really excited to try this year. Probably my most, probably the new pepper varieties that I'm most excited about. Now this first tomato plant here is supposed to be a Cherokee purple. But you can see it looks like it's kind of developing like a cherry tomato. So if you watched my in-ground garden tour a few days ago, I mentioned in that video that I had purchased a couple Cherokee purple plants as transplants from a local nursery because my seeds didn't germinate this year. So I got two Cherokee purples, or two plants that were labeled as Cherokee purple. One is here behind me on the deck, the other's out in the main garden area. And both of them seem to be developing like cherry tomatoes. So I don't know if there was some sort of seed mix-up. I don't know if you were following gardening last year. There was Peppergate last year where a lot of, supposed jalapeno seeds were mislabeled and were actually banana peppers. And I think there were some other pepper mix-ups as well. So I'm wondering if something similar maybe happened this year with Cherokee purple seeds. So I'm not sure what variety these plants actually are. Hopefully they're delicious, but I am kind of bummed that I'm gonna be missing out on my favorite Cherokee purple slicer this year. So I'll keep you updated on these plants and we'll see what happens with them. So in here, I've got a couple jalapenos. You can see this is a large pot here, and you can see I've got some basil growing with it, as well as some lamb's quarters, which was not intentional, but this will make a good snack for my daughter's rabbit. Or incidentally, this makes a great snack for people too. So these are Craig's Grande jalapenos. Because this is a large pot, I put two pepper plants together in it. There's a saying that says, peppers like to hold hands. So pepper plants can tolerate being spaced a lot more closely than many other types of plants that really need their space. And that's where the saying peppers like to hold hands comes from. So when I plant peppers in a large pot like that, sometimes I'll put 2 or even 3 in a pot if it's a really large pot. You'll see I have one other large pot, a really big pot with 3 pepper plants in it. So I'll show you that when we get to it. And incidentally, it's good for me that peppers like to be spaced pretty closely because this deck has turned into a crazy jungle. So I have never had a deck garden explode with growth the way this one has. So I may have spaced my plants a little more closely together than is really ideal because, as I said, I wasn't expecting them to get this large. I spaced them out the way I normally do, and normally they have a little more space. So for whatever reason this year, this container garden is crazy with growth. So down here, these are the jalapenos that we looked at. And in here, I've got another pepper plant. This one, admittedly, is probably a little more crowded than is ideal. The chamomile is really trying to make friends there. This is a Alessia pepper, which I grew for the first time last year and has a really delicious flavor. Now here, this chamomile is looking really good. I actually need to come out and harvest on this. And you can see I've got nasturtiums. This is actually coming out of that pepper pot back there. Here I have, let's see, this is a red Marconi pepper. This is a classic pepper, which I've actually never grown before. So this is my first year trying it. And it looks like this one doesn't have any fruits yet, but the leaves look really healthy. And then back here, I've got, let's see, back up a little bit so that you can actually see what I'm talking about. I've got 2 sun gold tomato plants here. That is my favorite cherry tomato. I always grow a lot of cherry tomatoes in general, but specifically a lot of sun gold tomatoes because they're so delicious. Everyone in my family loves them, and I eat so many of them throughout the summer. So I've got 2 sun gold tomatoes on the deck up here. So the sun gold is producing lots of fruit. So we haven't actually harvested any yet, but there are lots that are getting ready. So this tomato here, and then this one, I know it's kind of hard to distinguish individual plants. This one here is also a sun gold. And then in the back corner, you can see those larger tomato fruits. This is an Azoychka tomato. This is a Russian heirloom. We tried Azoychka for the first time last summer, and it was a really great tomato. It produced really well, so we got lots of beautiful yellow tomatoes from it. It's a medium-sized, round yellow tomato, really delicious. The flavor is really sweet and mild, so I know a lot of people prefer that type of flavor. That could be a really good option for you if you prefer that flavor. It's not my personal favorite flavor. I usually like a little bit of a richer, stronger tomato flavor, but I do still like the Azoychka, and for contrast, it's a really good option. So next to the Azoychka, I have the pink oxheart, which you can see has some tomatoes on it. This is another variety that I tried last year for the first time. I was really happy with it. It was really prolific, had really good flavor, just very, very dependable. So I'm excited to try that again this year. Then down in here, buried in the jungle, I've got a couple different pepper varieties. So this here is the Advarsky pepper, which I'm growing this year for the first time. And this one definitely has some flowers, maybe some really tiny fruits on it. And then back here, I have a red Corno de Toro, which, as I said, I know this garden is kind of crazy. As I said, I know it's kind of hard to distinguish some of the individual plants in this jungle here. I mean, right now, I'm loving this, but you know, it is only June. By the time you see this, I think it's gonna be very early July. But here, as I'm filming it, it's the end of June. And you know, these plants have a few more months of growth left. So we'll see if we're able to walk on the deck by the end of the summer. I don't know. I'm not gonna make any plans for next year yet because I wanna wait and see how this year plays out before I say that I'm gonna do something different next year. So we'll just see how the season goes and I'll let you know. So you may notice that on the deck, I have my tomatoes in tomato cages as opposed to trellised the way they are on the garden. That is because usually in the past, tomato plants on my deck don't get as large, and I find that on a deck, a tomato cage works fine. But this year, as you can see, they have definitely outgrown the tomato cages. This one here, this is a black cherry, and you can see this one made an early escape. Had another rung of tomato cage and kind of dived out the side. I didn't catch it in time to put it back in, so it's just gonna kind of be wild now. Now, you might notice that a couple of the plants on my deck have these little baggies around them. This is for seed saving. This plant here is a black cherry tomato plant, and that is an open pollinated heirloom variety. Basically what that means is that it's not a hybrid. That means if I want to save seeds from it, then as long as I prevent cross-pollination, seeds from this plant will produce the same variety again next year. So these little baggies are how I'm preventing cross-pollination. I find that tomatoes are so easy with this because tomato flowers are generally self-pollinating. So all you really have to do is to bag up some blooms before they open. So you can see these are open here, but I bagged them up when they were just little buds. And then what that does is it's going to ensure that the flowers in this bag will pollinate only from pollen that's also in this bag, so insects can't get in here and spread pollen from one flower to another. And basically that's going to ensure that these specific flowers will be pollinated with black cherry pollen, and they're going to produce black cherry tomato seeds, pure tomato seeds. That way if I save the seeds, next year I can plant them again and I can know exactly what I'm going to get. So down here, this pot that looks empty, I actually just put some basil seeds in there, so we will keep an eye on that. And here is my ginger, which I actually thought had died. I got this pot out and I was going to put some basil in this pot as well, but I saw that my ginger did have a little sprout, so we're going to let that be and see how that does. Now here, underneath this tomato, I've got a couple more peppers. I have a poblano pepper and a yellow Corno de Toro here. And you can see I like to plant nasturtiums and alyssum, plants like that mixed in. So behind these plants here, in this pot, this is the really large pot I mentioned that has 3 different pepper plants. I know, try to get you guys an angle where you can actually see what's going on there. So I've got 2 different color Corno de Toros in there and a jalapeno as well. And this is a really large pot. It's probably 20 something inches. And those plants just grow together perfectly happy. So I've grown 3 pepper plants together in that really large pot before. They've been completely fine. The difference this year is that the tomatoes all around them have gotten larger than normal, so they do have a little less space than normal. So as the season goes on, I'll keep an eye on that, and hopefully it won't get too crowded. But for right now, they look really great and healthy, so I'm happy with them so far. So here I've got a Wisconsin 55 tomato. You can see it's just starting to get some little tomatoes. So this is a medium red tomato that I grew last year for the first time. I was really happy with it. Down here I've got a rosemary plant. And then here I've got another red Corno de Toro. This one's trying to escape from the pot. You can see this one has some decent sized peppers on it already. And then back here I've got a Cindy's West Virginia tomato growing along with some basil. And this one I don't think has any tomatoes yet, but you can see it's got some flowers, so hopefully soon. So you probably noticed that a lot of these big pots, pretty much all of these big pots, in addition to like the one large plant they have in them, I like to put some other little plants. So a lot of that is basil, because basil is actually another plant that I have found in my experience to do really well in containers on the deck. The basil in my garden tends to get eaten a lot, so by planting it up on my deck in containers, I'm protecting it from whatever likes to munch on it down in the in-ground garden. So I find that basil on the deck does really well. So a great way to fit that in without adding more pots to the deck is to stick it in between my tomatoes and peppers. So we'll see how that goes as the season goes on. Historically, that's done really well for me in the past. So in here, I've got, you can see this is another large pot, and I've got 2 shishito pepper plants in there. I don't know if you can see, there's a few peppers that are just about ready to harvest back there. This is lamb's quarters, which I mentioned before is an edible weed. Got some nasturtiums. Then here I've got a Thorburns terracotta tomato. You can see I'm trying to save some seeds from this as well. This tomato plant is completely new to me, so I'm really excited to try it. So Thorburns terracotta was a highly recommended heirloom. It's supposed to have beautiful, delicious fruit. And a lot of you actually mentioned that it has an amazing flavor. Maybe not the best production, but great flavor. So I wanted to give it a try, and it looks like I'll get at least a handful of decent tomatoes from it, so I'm excited to try those. So here is a chocolate corno de toro. You can see something left some little nibble marks on some of the leaves. I'm not sure what that was, but whatever it was seems to have moved on because you can see the new growth looks good, so I'm not sure. This one actually has some decent sized peppers on it already. Now you may notice there's a couple little tiny peppers with a little ribbon on them. Those were both blooms that I made a point to isolate and to not let them cross-pollinate. So I wanted to mark those so that I know which peppers to save seeds from at the end of the season. Now this chocolate corno de toro is a pretty rare pepper variety. It's very tricky to find seeds for. I think there's only really a couple places I could find that even offer it. So I wanted to make sure to save seeds from it. Now I haven't tried the peppers yet because this is my first year growing it and I haven't had any ripe peppers yet. So I don't know for sure if I'm going to like it or not, but I figured the odds are good that I'm going to like it because, you know, it sounded really delicious, and I have grown the red variety and the yellow variety before and really enjoyed both of those. So the chocolate variety seems like a lot of fun. So I figured it didn't hurt anything. It didn't cost me anything more than a little bit of time to save some seeds from it, so I'm just going to go ahead and give that a try. And now I know which peppers will have pure seed to save seeds from. So over here is the little mini jungle section. You can see these tomatoes have gone crazy. Now take a look at this. Take a look at these tomato flower clusters here on this plant. This is a red centiflora, which centiflora means something along the lines of 100 flowers. I mean, this is an overachiever because that's more than 100 blossoms there. So we'll see how many of those actually turn into fruit, but so far that's looking pretty impressive. So you can see this really large pot here. I'm not sure how well you can actually see the pot itself. This has 3 cherry tomatoes in it. So similarly to the peppers, when I have this really large pot like that, I have many times in the past grown 3 cherry tomatoes or 3 cherry tomato plants in that giant pot. And what I do is, as you can see, these plants are not supported at all. In this situation, I just let them sprawl. I just try to make sure that they all sprawl in different directions. And these are just taking, you know, their sprawling job extra seriously this year, so it's extra jungly over here. So, you know, I'm thinking so far the plants look healthy. The goal is just to keep them that way as the season goes on. So in addition to the red centiflora, I also have a Berry's Crazy Cherry, which you can see this is, you know, in its own right, a pretty impressive bud cluster. And back here I've got one of these plants back here is a black cherry as well. And over here, I've got 3 peppers. These are all in individual pots. I've got a second Lesia pepper, which, let's see if I can find it. I think that one does actually have a small pepper on it. Down there, you can kind of see it. I've also got a red Marconi pepper and a lipstick pepper, which is another new variety for me this year. And I realized I missed showing you guys this pepper, which is a Mega Marconi. So I'm really excited to try this one this year. This is a new variety, and it seems like it's doing really well. So we'll give that one a try. This is basically a stabilized, open-pollinated version of the giant Marconi hybrid. So back over to this side. In this pot here, I have 2 jalapenos. And I don't know if I see any peppers yet, but flowers. And should get some jalapenos really soon. So here's my other green stalk. This is the leaf variety. You can see it has the shallower pockets and it's got more of them. So last time you saw this, this was filled with a lot of bolted salad greens. And you can see there's still a couple salad greens in it. These were a little bit slower to bolt. They are all bolting now, so I probably should go ahead and pull these out. But these weren't fully bolted at the time that I went through and cleaned out the others. This is definitely bolted now. But what I did was I pulled out everything, and every pocket that was empty I replaced with a green bush bean seed. Well, you know, I shouldn't say green. Some of these are green. I've also got purple and yellow, and I've got some red. So it'll be really exciting to be able to harvest some bush beans off of here. And I had a couple pockets that already had little bits of basil in them. So these bush beans are really just getting started, but I think so far they look nice and healthy. So I'm hoping for, you know, this made a great spring salad harvest up here on the deck, and now I'm hoping for summer we'll be able to enjoy some delicious beans from it. I realized I actually forgot to show you guys my most crazy and wild tomato up here. This is a Ukrainian purple, and yes, most of what you see in this section right here is this one Ukrainian purple tomato plant. Down here, I've got a bud cluster bagged here to save seeds from that too. This doesn't seem to have too many tomatoes yet. There's a couple little ones there. But based on the size of the plant and the number of flowers that it has, these are all flowers from this plant, and there's several other clusters like that. So I'm expecting a really good yield from this plant too. This is another variety that's new to me, so I don't know what to expect in terms of flavor aside from what the website that I ordered it from said. But it had good reviews and it sounded like a delicious variety. So it's supposed to be a plum-shaped tomato in a nice dark smoky purple color, which I'm really excited about. So hopefully this does really well. So I think that is the main highlights of the deck garden and the container garden. So you can see it is definitely possible to grow a lot of food even in a small space. You know, I've got my in-ground garden, which, you know, has a fair amount of space, but this is just on my small little deck here. So even if you just have an apartment with a little patio, even if you don't have room for as many plants as this, you could grow a couple plants and have enough for a delicious summer harvest for yourself and your family. So I definitely encourage you to give container gardening a try, whether like me, you have an in-ground garden and you just want a little more space and just a little variety. Or if you know, if that's all the space you have, then don't be discouraged, and don't be discouraged by the fact that you don't have a huge garden, because it is still possible to grow food in a small space. One of the biggest keys that I find to, you know, there's a couple real keys that I find to successful container gardening. One is to make sure that your plants get enough water, because plants in containers dry out much more quickly than plants on the deck. And then kind of the flip side of that is to also make sure that your containers have good drainage, because if your container doesn't have good drainage, that water is not going to have anywhere to go and the roots can get waterlogged and also damage the plant. The other thing to keep in mind is that there's only so much nutrition available in a pot. So every so often, you know, just be sure to feed your plants. You know, plants in the ground, they can still need to be fed, but their roots can travel to find the nutrients that they need. Plants in pots like this, I mean, they're limited by the space that they have. So you're going to have to bring the nutrition to them. But it's definitely possible. Honestly, I find container gardening to be a little bit lower maintenance than gardening in the ground. So I definitely hope you give it a try. Go ahead and leave a comment and let me know if you are into container gardening, if you grow a lot in containers. What are your favorite plants to grow in containers? Because I would love to get new ideas. So I hope you're having a great day, and I can't wait to see you soon. I'll see you next time.